In other words, when it comes to our lives, we say to people, this is my party, and if you want to participate, your attitudes are going to have to be dressed accordingly. Amen? Now, if we go back to God's party, we can hear the same thing being said. Just as we don't like being manipulated and rearranged, dissected, just as we do not feel good about people picking and selecting those things about us that they're personally comfortable with and discarding the rest as irrelevant, I'm sure Christ feels the same way. Do you know that there are some people, not in this church, of course, that feel stewardship should not be talked about at all, and that giving and stewardship should not be talked about in the pulpit, a lot like religion and politics at a party. Can you imagine that? I can. Sounds a lot like they're saying you can be a tither if you choose to be, or a free will giver if you choose to be, if you must. But let's not talk about it. You definitely don't bring it home. Does that sound familiar? The problem with that is that the Bible is the story of our God, the story of our Christ, His life, His beliefs, His teachings. And the whole purpose of being a Christian is to be more like Christ in our living. To put on the righteousness of Christ and prepare for our party with God. And when reading the Bible, we find that it has a lot more to say about giving, about stewardship, than just about any single other aspect of our church and our personal lives. In other words, stewardship is a big part of who and what Christ is. A big part of what God teaches. A big part of being a Christian. Let me show you what I mean. There was some research done. It was very interesting to see exactly what weight stewardship held in the Bible. And they used the size of the good book as a guide. If we decide that stewardship is not something that we're comfortable with, and we take it out of the Bible, all of stewardship, all the promises of God, all the stewardship that Christ holds himself responsible for, all the stewardship principles that we are held accountable to, all the stewardship principles expected of us as Christians, if we remove them and not deal with them, then our Bible would be about this big. But being more realistic, we have to admit that most of us are very comfortable with our God being a good steward, aren't we? Amen? We're very, very comfortable with God's promises to us, with all the wonderful love that God extends, and with the promise of everlasting life, and all those nice, good to have, easy to talk about stewardship things. If we put those back into the Bible, and then our picture of Christ, our knowledge of Christ, would be about this big. It's only when we choose to deal with the real Christ, all that God is, all that Jesus taught, all that Christ represents, and we put all the pieces back together, do we have this book, the whole body of Scripture. You don't like to see yourself dissected? We will not dissect God here. It will all be considered as due and viable to us in our living. You see, just as we and other marginalized people get all kinds of upset when others try to pick and choose one or two scriptures to suit their comfort level to use on us and ignore all the rest of them, Christ has an equal right to be upset when we do the same thing with him. Stewardship is a big part of who Christ is. Just as we are declared special and loved, just as we are, Christ is also very special and very holy, just as he is. It becomes very clear that Christ's whole life is one of giving. And from what is written, it's also very clear that Christ never was afraid to talk about it. And the whole banquet story is about inviting those who have put on the righteousness of Christ, or strive to become more like Christ. And that means we strive to act like Christ, and think like Christ, and talk like Christ, and give like Christ. Now, I'd like to share a bit of truth with you. Perhaps you may not have realized before now. Long, long ago, in a life far away, noting gray hair not too far from some of us, as Star Wars would put it, when many